I usually like to start off by asking people if they've got a cuppa. I usually have a cup of tea. However, I've just got myself water because it's a bit warm today.
I've got water.
Yep,
I do.
So cheers.
Cheers.
Hello creative Tartanites and welcome to Tea with Tania. Today I'm having a very open and honest chat with Rafi and Klee. Now Rafi is an award-winning artist and Klee not only is his partner but also an artist in her own right. She's a musician, she sings, and she's a jeweler. This is a rather long chat, but please bear with us. There is some really interesting topics being spoken about, and I'm sure that there will be some things that you will very much resonate with, and I do hope that you find benefit in listening. So grab yourself a cup of tea, and if you have to, just pause. Go back to it. I'm sure you'll find it worth it. So without further ado, I give you Rafi and Klee.
So, Rafi and Klee, obviously I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit about you guys, but I thought an interesting way to do this is perhaps for Klee, maybe for you to explain a little bit about who Rafi is, and Rafi, for you to explain a little bit about Klee, rather than individually.
That sounds awesome.
Okay. Well, Rafi is crazy. He's a crazy human in the best way possible. I've known him for over a decade now. He's never been predictable. He loves a challenge. He's a problem solver, and he's incredibly dynamic. And I think it's really why, like 10 years in every day, I'm fascinated by him. He's always pursuing something. He's having fun with it. He's passionate about what he does. Which is a lot of things. I mean, most people know him, of course, as a painter and YouTuber, but he's constantly trying things and pushing himself, and you just never know what he's going to do. And a lot of times that's very uncomfortable for me, actually, because he'll get on something and then we're just doing it, like, especially during this time, a lot of social media stuff. So one day I was in my jammies and we were just live streaming on Instagram. Next thing I knew,
I wanted to figure out how to do it. So,
yeah. So that's him. He is an incredibly fun, dynamic, creative human to share a studio and a life with. And it's awesome. Also, he's very funny and very handsome. And that's what... and very good at what he does. I mean, I think the reason we do so many things is because he doesn't like not knowing how to do things. So he's very good at figuring out the things and pushing through those comfort zones.
I feel like I should leave. Like, like I should step out of screen.
I think he's real good. I think very highly of him.
So I take it that's different perhaps to what you would have said if I had asked you, Rafi, what do you do? What, you know?
Yeah, possibly. I think I would have gone into like, I'm a painter and I do paintings and I'm cool.
And I wrote a book he wrote a book this year, which terrified him through the whole process.
Yeah.
I was so proud of him for pushing through that.
Well, I mean, it terrified me because like I had never written a book before. And then I was like, man, I've always wanted to write a book. Let me do this. And I knew that I was going to be terrified throughout the process and go through all the mental stuff that pops up, you know, like you suck, nothing you write is going to be any good, blah, blah, all that stuff and it's just persisting through that bull crap and getting through it. And now I have a book. I'm like, yes, I have a book. So
that's the other thing about Rafi. I would call him doggedly hopeful. Okay. Genuinely, like I've never known someone who contains more hope within themselves, because and right now is like uber apparent to me more so than ever. I can go down the rabbit hole of like reading too many articles about what's going on, following too many news headlines, and that kind of thing, or just generally being stressed out about various things. And Rafi is really like my counterbalance there. Like he really is doggedly hopeful when it comes to people, the state of things, our circumstances. I think that's like his powerhouse of his career and his life. He just really sees the best and the potential all the time.
I try.
I mean,
I like to say that I'm just kind of oblivious, just walking around oblivious in the world. I love it. I love the idea of people calling me Pollyanna or wearing rose-colored glasses.
But he doesn't. He doesn't wear rose-colored glasses. I mean, he sees what's going on.
I see what's going on, but you could always, change the lens that you're looking at something through. Just because you're looking at it through whatever lens, you could change that up. And,
yeah, absolutely.
It's
about perception, isn't it? It is. It really does make such a difference. I mean, a very simple story is that I had moved house a few years ago now, and I just was so upset that I didn't have any money left to change this pink bathroom. And then I kind of really switched my brain around to be thinking more about the fact that actually, here I am, I'm living in the Highlands of Scotland. There are mountains surrounding my house, and suddenly that shift of perspective, the bathroom didn't seem so important anymore. And at least it was avocado green.
Right.
Absolutely. That's a perfect example. Yes.
Yeah, we got to experience that a little bit when we started our travels. When we first met, we started our travels, and we lived in a old 92 Ford Explorer, and we traveled around the country, and we were in Key West. And Key West is basically like an island paradise. It's part of the U.S., but when you go there, it's like the furthest southern point of the U.S., and it's just an island. So it almost seems like you're in another country, and even the culture there is very laid back. But it's paradise. It's absolutely gorgeous. And this was the beginning of our relationship and the beginning of our travels, and like kind of letting go of that old life behind. And so there were days where the little things that you're used to ruminating on, and they would pop in. It was like, and whenever something like that happens, it's like your entire life just revolves around this one bad thing that is going on, and everything just gets tainted by it. But then I would go outside and stand by the ocean. There's this pier called the White Street Pier, which goes off into the ocean. And you're standing there and you're looking around and you're like, how is it that I am free from where I used to be? I am standing in the middle of paradise. And how is it that I can take this experience and turn it into a negative one? Obviously, the only factor here that is the same as my miserable life before and what's going on now is me and the way that I think.
Yeah.
And I can change the way that I think. I can change the way that I look at this. So I think a lot of my perspective has to do with the road trip that we went on, because it got to the point where I realized that if let's say we were on the road, there was no safety net, no security, no nothing. If we ran into a negative situation and our mindset was already negative, there was no way we were going to get out of that. It was, and when you're on the road, it's almost like life and death. Who knows what you're going to run into? And so I knew that if we were going to survive it and make the most of that journey, that we would have to at least keep our eyes open for the positive and the hopeful and remain in a good place. And to me, it became life or death. Like you have to look at the world not in a blinded, like wearing blinders. Understand that there is negativity. Look at the negativity, face the negativity, see how you feel about it, and then see how it is that you can feel empowered
Yeah.
even though that's still there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what became solidified, and that's kind of infused into everything that we do here in the studio. Not just me. I mean,
Yeah.
Clee's freaking amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a good opportunity then for you to introduce Klee to us then.
Okay,
excellent. Who's Klee?
Oh man, how am I going to follow up after that?
I don't know.
I mean, so I'm not as eloquent and as gifted with words as Klee is. So I'm going to try to define the magical creature that is Klee. Klee is somebody that when I first laid eyes on her, there was a light. And this sounds very like weird or whatever, but there was just a light that was emanating from her. And if there was any way to describe that light, it was like the same kind of light that you see when you look at a child and they're immersed in the hopeful imagination. And so it's just this complete purity of love and joy and hopeful imagination, despite the fact that there was a lot of other things that were wanting to bury that. You know, like us adults, we go through life and like crap happens, and it's like you hold on to like my parents were alcoholic, you know, all that stuff. Even despite all that stuff that happened in her life that wasn't so great, that hopefulness and that joy and that willingness to look to the future, even though her mind was like, there's no such thing as a real happy relationship, you know, all the garbage and the baggage that you took with, that light was still there and it was still bright. And so immediately I was attracted to her, to that person. I was fascinated by her.
Yeah.
And then the way that she looks at the world, and it just, people call me crazy. And the fact of the matter is that there aren't very many people out there that will engage in a conversation with me and I walk away from that conversation feeling like I'm just better for it. And luckily enough for me, I live with somebody that is that way.
Mm-hmm.
Every conversation, every interaction, everything that we do, she wears her emotions on her sleeve. She cannot hide her emotions. She wears them on her sleeve and her face. Whatever she is feeling, it is out there. There is no double standard, no hidden agenda or anything when it comes to her. It's just complete and utter honesty. And even when it's something that maybe she's not sure that she's running through an insecurity, it'll be like, I don't know if this is true, but this is how I feel, you know, and we have those conversations. And, you know, she's just as crazy as I am, if not even more. And it's perfect. It's perfect. I mean, really, there's not enough that I could say to really describe her. She is uber talented at so many things, carries her insecurities on her sleeve, is constantly, she's the more careful one, you know, whereas I'm the jump in with both feet. I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm, you know, plummeting down the side of a mountain. And a lot of times she's kind of the yin to that yang, you know, where if because I am impulsive, I am extremely impulsive. But I am purposefully impulsive because I was never an impulsive person. And so sometimes I tend to go a little bit more extreme because it's almost like I'm trying to show myself that I can be this way because that's who I want to be. Yeah. So, you know, where you go overboard. And then she's kind of, she's the one that will be like, okay, but just in case you want to take a look at it. But then she's not somebody who will stop me from pursuing whatever it is that I want to pursue. She will support me all the way. It's only when she sees me going into maybe a negative downward spiral or heading in a direction that's going to lead to a rut that she's able to spot those. And I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. There's so many things I can't even just. She's amazing at look at that smile. I mean, she's
Aw.
just, she's awesome.
Jeez.
You want to leave the scene now so I can continue?
Wow,
I mean,
that's just awesome. It really is, guys. I mean, I've been watching you two for quite some time, and the chemistry between you is just awesome. And some of the things that you've done. I recently watched the Jedi video that you did, and that you had me buckle. It's so funny, because I see a little bit of me in both of you. Because Klee, I would have been the one going and getting the makeup on and doing that whole kind of, actually getting really into character. That would have been so me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's actually how I sort of like overcame the fear of the camera, was to just embrace the side of myself that's just full on like theater nerd, like just get into character and just go all in. And have fun with it. Yep.
Yeah, I think one of the things that people don't understand is that we're both very we could have and could still be called introverts. I'm not big on labels, because a lot of people like to say you're either an introvert or an extrovert, and I think that we're a little bit of it all. It just depends on what we decide to do with it. And so, but when we first started doing the YouTube, that was terrifying. Some of the old videos that I have from us traveling, because we took a camera with us on the road, and I'm doing what I call the cool guy talking to the camera, where I'm all like, so this is the thing, that we're doing, and we're walking, and I've always got like this serious cool face, and I'm like, when I watch those, I'm like, God, that guy is an idiot. Like, he shouldn't be filming stuff, because he's not being genuine. He's trying to be cool instead of like being himself. So I think it's one of the benefits of doing YouTube is that we've been able to put ourselves out there in a way that really, really pushes at our comfort zones. Yeah. And I think that when you do that, you push out your comfort zones, you get to really genuinely show yourself who you are, not just following some label of like, oh, you're an introvert or you're socially awkward. Yeah. And that's a bad thing. Instead, you get to show yourself who you are and understand that you don't fall into any label. You're completely and utterly unique. And
yeah. I think we've all got those cringy videos. I've certainly got videos way back, where, believe it or not, I actually sounded so like monotone and so robotic, and this is welcome to my channel kind of voice. So we've all been there, done that, I think. And it's through getting to interact with other artists and the more that I've done videos that I've started to be a little bit more relaxed on video, and I've done, even before I did my YouTube, I've done stage. I've been in principal parts. I have played, believe it or not, the Widow Corney in Oliver. Wow, cool. I have done some scary stuff, but I still was like, oh.
It's a different animal.
It is.
And investigating that is so fascinating, because I was in bands for a long time. I played music live.
She's a lead vocalist, so she was up in the front of the stage singing. You
never really get 100% comfortable, but like I had that on lockdown. Like I got to a point where I was pretty comfortable with that, but then it's a different animal every time. YouTube is a different animal. Podcasts are a different animal.
It is. I did corporate training where I spoke in front of thousands of people. Put me in a room with 1,000 people and I could stand there and talk to them just fine. Put a guitar in my hand and my knees buckle. Put a camera in my face at first. Now I'm a little bit more comfortable with the camera, but put a camera in my face and it was the same thing. I was like, hola. It was so like there was no feeling behind it because I was constantly aware of the camera going on.
Yeah.
And what I think is super interesting about this, especially for artists, is that when you're looking at any creative medium, basically it is a language, right? So paintings are a language.
Yeah.
Videos, this is a language that is happening. This interaction, people will take from it what they take from it. The paintings, music that you listen to, people take from it what they take from it. It is all communication and language. And there is this saying of finding your voice.
Yeah.
And I think really when it comes down to it is when you are putting yourself out there and you are communicating, whether it's with art, music, YouTube videos, a podcast, whatever it is, there does come that initial point where you're not comfortable. And I think finding your voice is just being comfortable with what you're doing and allowing
looking at it.
Yeah. And so like it's one of the reasons that in the videos, like I'm constantly referring to the doing videos or like facing rejection on YouTube or facing anything like that, because the similarities between my art career and what we've done on the internet is, I mean, they're one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's one and the same. So if you're afraid of putting yourself out there in a video, chances are it's attached to that insecurity of just putting yourself out there in general.
Which means like to push through, you have to do it a lot, and that it's going to suck for a long time emotionally, and it might suck in general. Like make a lot of bad art that's not you finding your voice until you get there.
Yeah. Then you get to look back and be like, yeah, whoa, that was pretty stiff. I was pretty stiff in creating those, you know. So I think it's all part of the journey. And, you know, to say that like I have found my voice, or that I have, you know, maybe I found my voice when it comes to certain things, even when it comes to the art, because I'm very confident in my art. But I'm also constantly pushing at the boundaries of what comes next. What is the next evolution of this thing that I'm doing? And I think that is all intertwined with anything creative that we do. Anything creative that we do, and any facet that we're using in order to communicate who we are to the world, and to communicate what it is that we have to say about ourselves, basically, because we're all looking at this through our own filters. So people interpret it whichever way they interpret it. And as an artist, you don't concern yourself with the interpretation or what it means to somebody or defining that meaning. As the artist, it's just you create and say what it is that you need to say, that you want to say, and then let people do with it whatever they will do with it. Including the videos. I think I found my voice at the moment that I realized I just didn't care if people liked me or not. I just wanted to say this thing, or I wanted to talk about this because I wanted to share what I had experienced and what I had learned, and see, and for some people, maybe it's beneficial. And I finally got to the point that if there was one person out there, it only takes one person for it to make a difference in their life, then I did something altruistic.
Yeah.
So, by the way, I tend to ramble a lot. I ramble a lot. So feel free to just cut me off and tell me like, okay, Rafi, we've got a different direction that we want to go in, because once this mouth gets started.
It's absolutely fine, because sometimes when I'm talking to people, if people are rambling, it kind of allows me that time to kind of get in my own head what direction I want the conversation to go in. And sometimes it'll surprise me, and it takes me in a direction that I wasn't expecting, but that's not always a bad thing. And I'm very much, whilst I will use my skills to direct certain conversations in a certain way, I also enjoy listening to conversations that haven't gone how I thought they were going to go. So it's absolutely fine.
Okay.
In fact, I'm probably, I'm very guilty of rambling myself. Very, very guilty of rambling myself. So doing these interviews has allowed me to utilize the skills that I've learned from being a nurse, and because I do a lot of like assessments and things, and doing a lot more listening than I do talking. So it's actually helping me to hone my skills. So thank you.
Yeah, active listening, that is a challenge for me. What's interesting is that I'm not the kind of person that is thinking about what I'm going to say when someone else is speaking, to a certain extent, because I'm following the conversation, surely what you're doing. Because I've had conversations with people where like you're talking to them and you could tell my dad is one of them, like all of a sudden their eye pattern changes and you're like, you're not even listening to what I'm saying, So I very actively listen. The only problem is that when I have something that I want to interject with, a lot of times I have to consciously, actively sit back and just say, it's fine. You'll get to say it if it's relevant later. If it really matters.
But you can see him get like excited about it.
Because I get really excited.
And I think most humans experience that, of like that moment of yes, and this and this and this.
Yeah.
I'm more of an active listener in general. I which is why the peanut gallery position that I hold is an excellent one for me on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Just interacting sporadically. And also being comfortable just listening and observing. And
yeah, I mean, it's one of the reasons that the videos are not scripted. One thing I wanted to make sure that I didn't do was to follow a script when I'm doing the YouTube videos, because I wanted it to be absolutely genuine. If I don't know what I'm talking about, then I have no reason talking about it. So the more that I learn, the more I'm able to share, the more that I experience, the more I'm able to share. But turning on the camera and just talking and then having Klee there to bounce off of like what I'm saying and going back and forth. It's really caused us to be able to find our voice when we're on YouTube.
With each other. Yeah, that's true.
And really in interacting, because I mean the one thing that I knew that we were going to run into people, and we have run into people out that recognize us. They're like, oh look, it's Rafi and Klee.
And sometimes we're like, we just came to get some light bulbs.
Yeah. But if they have our interaction with us, I want them to see that like what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
There's no scripted thing. I'm not going to get on there and be like, hey everybody, how you doing? It's Rafi and
unless
the art. Ooh.
Unless it's me and I have some facts that I need to present.
That shows you the vast difference between us, because Klee has facts.
Sometimes I have facts
like,
and I need them.
I want to make sure that I talk about these things.
Or I will forget them, so that I will have like a bullet list sometimes of like, don't forget to talk about these things, Klee, because otherwise it could be.
If you watch those videos, you'll see me interact, and sometimes if you watch closely, you'll see me like interact with Klee, and like it'll take her out of her rhythm of the notes that she has.
But then remembering that, oh yeah, that's what we do. So don't get too lost in the bullet numbered facts.
Yeah.
I love this woman so much, because she is so, it's almost like watching someone giving a speech in school, standing up there. And there have been times where after she's done, like she'll even do the little head nod where she's like,
and
it was a little curtsy.
Yeah, I recently did I answered a viewer's question, and I had gone, it was before the lockdown happened. It was literally just before the lockdown happened here. I'd gone to the park and I'd kind of sort of done a little bit of walkabout with the dog, and done some filming and filmed my answer. And then when I got home, I realised that there was some things that I wished I had said that I hadn't said because I wasn't scripted. But having said that, what I said still made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's the beauty of editing video is that then if you're like, oh, I totally forgot to say this, you could evaluate at that moment if that's going to become another video and you're just going to say it in another video, or you get to do a cut and take. I that's where when you see a video where like I'm talking to you guys and then all of a sudden I'm standing outside and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And I say something, that's because later on I was like, oh man, I really want to share this point. And I think my videos are so poorly edited that it really doesn't matter what I do with the video as long as the information is in there.
Well, we're certainly not going for like wardrobe continuity or anything like that. But you know, what you said is really cool because it's something that I've had to get more comfortable with as we do this. Understanding, so like he'll be talking about a subject, right? And I am kind of doing the like monitoring the situation, like to make sure like, did we answer the question? Did we say what we meant to say? And oftentimes I feel like I have felt like in the past, like, no, maybe we didn't get there. And that's why I feel like I need that anchor.
Yeah.
But when he's free flowing and when a conversation is free flowing, almost always it gets there. And for me, who's like a little more structured when it comes to stuff like that, it's understanding that like it gets there. And even if it takes the long way around or it takes a detour and covers even like new territory, like you said, conversations will go a direction that you didn't expect and it's awesome. It almost always gets there.
Yeah. And I think that's describing right there is the creative journey.
Yeah.
Like if you are thinking about it too much and you're in your brain too much, and because essentially right there you are assuming that you have to get it right. You cannot miss anything. You have to get it right. Whereas when you're having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, you're free flowing and there is an exchange of energy that goes back and forth between the people. That it's almost like this conversation crescendos and it has its variations and it goes this way and it goes that way, but it will always come back to where it needs to be. And when I'm working on a piece, when I'm working on some art, and I'm trusting that no matter what it is that I'm seeing in front of me, that this piece is going to eventually get to where it needs to be, that's when it turns out beautifully.
Yeah. When
I overthink it, that's when I got to walk away. Yeah. And so like I've seen myself in videos. There's a lot of videos that people don't see on YouTube because I'll have thought of a subject or had one of those aha moments where I'm like, oh, no, actually, it doesn't happen with the aha moments. When I'm in the studio, I'm like, I got to share this. And then those videos always come out really good. I like them. When somebody asks a question and all of a sudden I worry about the pressure.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Yes.
Yeah, like we have 20,000 subscribers. I don't want to let anybody down. And I know that now it's almost like it's the opposite of the idea. I'm going to put this piece of art out there. I know some people are going to be offended by the nudity. I know that some people are going to love it. I know that some people are going to look at it and be like, that's a piece of crap. Why is he even painting? It doesn't matter. Yeah. Because everybody has their own opinion and their own thing based on what life they're living and what perspective they look at the world. And so like each video, I'm going to get the hater. I'm going to get the people that love it. And essentially what that does is weed out the people that don't like it. And the people that do see eye to face, the people that see eye to eye, those are the people that really retain that information. Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing as with your creativity and the connecting in the world. If you're having a conversation with somebody on the street, you're not going to have a conversation with somebody that doesn't get it.
Yeah, it's a little like having that sort of idea of linear time where you can only go forward and it's always, in a line. And kind of expecting your life to go like that too. And so when people come to a crossroads, they automatically think, well, it's either one way or the other. But that's not necessarily strictly true because there's always a third option.
Yep.
There's always the exception to the rule. There's, there's always room for change, regardless of, just because you've gone down one path doesn't mean that you can't veer off that path and go down the other. There's
Absolutely.
this fear of not getting it right. And
it's paralyzing if you let it. Yeah.
And that's I love that you use that analogy, because that's the analogy that I used in the book, where I talk about blazing your own trail. And basically the idea was that, and in the book I use it as an analogy for when you are wanting to become an artist. And when you want to become an artist, there's these ideas that people get in their brain of like, well, this is what it means to be an artist, whether they got it from TV, their teachers, their parents, the neighbors, whoever it is. This is what it means to be an artist, and this is what I have to do. And thinking that there's one path, and usually it's some starving path, and then, or there's this other path. And not understanding that if you have a machete, you could basically create whatever path you want.
Yeah.
You can traverse the entire landscape instead of just picking one or the other. You when you blaze your own trail, you're the one that's leading the way in a very unique path. And I put that in the book, but to signify that, but in actuality, it kind of encompasses everything that I do, because I know that if I'm thinking that it's this or that, then I am looking at it from a very blinded perspective, because it's never just this or that.
Mm-hmm.
There is always an option 3, 4, 42 is what I said in the book, because
that's the answer to life.
Yeah, it's the universe. Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I love that, because the idea that the idea of us beautiful humans is that we tend to limit what we are capable of by our own limitations.
Yeah.
And usually we have these brilliant excuses that justify the limitation that we've set for ourselves. And then some people see those limitations and decide that there are no longer limitations.
Yeah.
And some people live as a victim to those limitations and get really mad at life.
Mm-hmm. Do you know my favorite that I like to kind of poo-poo is the one that says, yes, you're a jack of all trades, but a master of none.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but I'm eclectic, and I really like to have my fingers in lots of different pies.
Yeah.
Did you know that phrase was originally meant as a compliment? There's a second part of that
never gets repeated.
That never gets said, but it's the second part. But oftentimes better than a master of one is how it finishes.
Yeah.
I think I might be
oftentimes
paraphrasing.
better than a master of one.
Yeah, it was meant as a compliment to say that you are
a jack of all trades.
Yeah, that you try a lot of things, and that you're while you may not have mastered some of them, you're doing them.
Yeah.
And I like that.
And it's interesting, because that also flies in the face. It was a compliment, but then I think in the way that, and obviously I'm speaking primarily about the United States. I'm not really sure what the educational system or any of the systems are around the world, but I assume that there isn't very different standards, because a lot of us relate to this. And it is that it's almost like things are set up in a way where there is a path that is ideal to follow.
Mm-hmm.
And divergent thinking is not necessarily rewarded.
No.
And being a jack of all trades is divergent thinking, because when you're looking at a problem, then you have an array of solutions to choose from. Or you could grab this from over here, this from over here, and see what you could create. And it's basic innovation and problem solving and creativity. That's all it is. It's just innate in all of us. but it's almost frowned upon because usually if you're a jack of all trades, it means that you also kind of buck the system.
It makes you dangerous
Yeah.
on the dance floor of the mind.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it is counterproductive because for the most part, a lot of companies do not need people to be innovative. They just need people to go in and do the job that is requested of them.
At least that's what they think they need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now they're missing out because you either hire a robot that is just going to do exactly what you tell them to do, or you're going to hire somebody who's going to figure out a better way.
Yeah.
And that, I think that it's one of the reasons that the system is in there, because from the Industrial Revolution, you had a lot of people that they just needed factory workers. We need you to put these cogs in this thing, and we need you to do this. And, as long as you don't have big dreams or get too creative, then you're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of what we experience today, just as far as society and the way that society rewards certain aspects, like you get rewarded. You work at a company for 10 years, you do your job, you do exactly what you're supposed to do, and then you get a plaque that says that you did a good job, and then you get a retirement.
Yeah.
And I was that corporate guy that had my plaques and my awards up on the wall, and they don't mean anything. There's nothing there other than the value that I put there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was self-identifying when I described myself to people. Oh, I'm a corporate manager, because that gave me some sense of the conformity game, which is the conformity game is a process of comparing yourself to everyone else to see where you fall in the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And whereas when you're a nonconformist, you don't fall into any hierarchy. There is no reason for you to, that's why I tell artists, don't compare yourself to another artist. There is no reason. But I think all of us are so used to being in that world that we do the comparison game. We do put ourselves down. We do think that we're getting it wrong most of the time. A lot of artists, I don't have the education. I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't have the experience. I don't have, and so it's almost like they talk themselves out of it because they think that they're supposed to fall into a system when there is no system. You blaze your own trail. You create your own path. There isn't just this way or that way. And that's why when you get artists who are out there creating their careers in art, it's like herding wild geese. Like there's no, they're impossible to pin down because they're all so used to doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's beautiful. I think it's beautiful that we should all get out there and just do our thing and create the best possible unique art and career and whatever it is that we want to do. If I want to go dance down the street in a tutu and film it, then that's my creative prerogative.
Mm-hmm.
And
we've gotten more comfortable really, really recently with the idea that we are multimedia artists. I mean, I called myself a jeweler for many years.
Yeah.
And then, the musical end or the YouTube end or whatever other end I was looking at was just this other thing.
Like a hobby. Yeah.
Yeah. And I realized, and it's so not a big deal, but in that moment I was like, I changed my Twitter thing to say multimedia artist.
Okay.
Instead, and Instagram, I think. And I was like, you're just editing the thing that Twitter says. But for me, I was like, I'm embracing this.
Yeah.
I am a multimeat artist, which means
the
I have
skies
license.
opened up.
Yeah, the heavens opened up and cherubs and all that. But I have license to do whatever I please. And just that little gesture, just little gestures can shift the gears.
There are so many ideas out there about what it means to be an artist, and depending on who you talk to, It's one of the reasons that it's so confusing. It's super confusing because if you're talking to people that are looking at the mainstream art world as the ideal of what it means to be an artist, then there's a very weird perception that you're going to get. And the mainstream art world is all about the gatekeepers and the middlemen and the people that give you permission to do what it is that you're going to do. And that's definitely not the art world.
Yeah.
The art world are the individual artists who are out there creating the art.
Yeah.
And I think if people just kind of step back and look at the system and realize how the system, not how the system works, because there are many ways, but like if you're looking at the way that these systems fall in place and that these opinions become truths, and that's basically what they are, because what art critic has the right to criticize something as subjective as art? What artist has the right to compare another artist to another artist based on whatever subjective thing it is that they're looking at?
Yeah. It's interesting you should say that, because even I have found myself comparing in a negative way, I confess, and I stopped doing it. But it was, I tried to apply for a competition. One of our art companies here, Jackson's Art, they do art competitions every now and then, and I had applied to get into this art competition, and I found myself thinking, how on earth did they get in and I didn't? And it was like these the particular piece of art was it simply wasn't my taste, and but I found myself being quite resentful of them getting in, and had to really chin myself to say, well, actually, it's just because it's not your taste doesn't say that they don't have the right to be in. But it's so hard to kind of be on that neutral level where you're not kind of comparing, particularly when you have this perception that, you're going to get found out as being this fraud, that you're not really this artist that you think you are.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone escapes that, that struggle, that emotional struggle.
I really do not think that it would be healthy for me. This is something that it would be healthy for me to say, like, I need to get rid of this, because I never will. I think really it's understanding that, that's active within me. So I've had that happen where I've applied for a competition and then like somebody else won, and of course it's going to stroke my own ego if I'm like, well, that how did they win? I mean, because it's like, it's you question everyone. And unfortunately for me, because of the family that I grew up with, what follows that is they must have known somebody. Oh, that's got to be related to somebody. There was whatever, like, it's almost like it becomes this conspiracy theory of the world is against you. That happened to me here in town with some of the local artists that are they're pretty famous here in town, but they're local famous. And I wasn't allowed into the boys club. Now I even say that I wasn't allowed into the boys club. That is not true. But I created this entire conspiracy theory of like, well, their art isn't any good compared to mine. I mean, it's fine. Their art is better, and it depended on where I was on the emotional scale, whether or not their art was better and I should just give up, or, I'm being, they're treating me like an outsider, or they're doing this. Like, I created, now it doesn't last long with me, because once this starts to happen and you start feeling those emotions, and anything that doesn't feel empowering to me, I know is giving me a false sense of reality. So like if I'm sitting there and I was sitting there and because if somebody was actually trying to exclude me, let's say that the artist here, the artist that I'm talking about tried to exclude me, at that point I have I have something empowering that I could do. I can either A, confront them, or B, just like say, I don't care, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know where I stand with you. That is still empowering for me. So I don't need you. I know where I stand. Whereas when you're in this, not amorphous, when you're in this unknown region where everything is fuzzy and you're not sure if this is true, but you have this conspiracy theory or this, and your brain is running scenarios, there is no solution to that. You cannot find an empowering place in that other than realizing like, oh, I'm making up stories. I am just telling some amazing stories to try and keep myself small, because apparently I have touched on something that is pushing at one of my comfort zones. So anytime that I do that, I actually look for what it is that I'm pushing up against and understand that like, oh, okay, I'm going to face some issues when I'm going up against this. The same thing happened with the book. I wanted to quit writing the book
so many times.
I would say there had to have been hundreds of times. And there were hundreds of excuses. There were all these brilliant I had every amazing excuse to quit writing the book. I should have quit writing the book based on these excuses because they were that great.
Yeah.
But I knew that they were just excuses.
Yeah.
And I knew that at the end of the day, either I was going to have a book to show for it or not. And so I chose the book. And I think that whether it is doing the comparison game where you look at somebody, you look at somebody's art and you're like, why is that? And understanding, I think getting having the following on YouTube, because everybody's got a different degree of, not talent, a different degree of where they're at with their art.
Yeah.
And everybody has a different style. Like some people have a very, what I love to call a very childlike style. I'm actually very jealous of a lot of the childlike style art that's out there because I have a hard time drawing that way. And then you've got artists out there that do photorealistic paintings. And there are times where I look at them and I'm like, why are you following me? Like, why are you following me on social media? Like, have you seen your art?
Yeah.
But it's funny. It's those things pop into your mind and you realize that like you're doing the thing that conformity does, is you're setting up your role in the hierarchy. We experience that beautifully when we're in high school, when we're in school. Because you are either part of the popular crowd or you are part of this crowd or part of that crowd. And so you're constantly figuring out and evaluating where you fit in the hierarchy of the power structure that's set up. For me, when I got into my senior year, I realized that I didn't fit into any hierarchy. I wasn't part of any of the things. I wasn't a jock. I wasn't just one of the creative art, our introverted, nerdy kids. I wasn't social. I wasn't popular. I was just kind of like this weird thing that didn't belong to any group. And so I think that had a huge impact on my personality and trying not to fit in later on. Because then I just went right into corporate and tried to fit in. But that's a different story. Let's not get into that one.
But isn't it interesting, though, how we as human beings, we all have our stories, whether that be said out loud or whether they're in our head. I mean, my theory as to why I wasn't getting into, getting anywhere with competitions is that I wasn't artsy-fartsy enough. My explanation of because you see all these flowery and flouncy type, this art was done because of my blue period, and because it was my blue period, I decided to be opposite to that, and I used this color instead. All this kind of stuff, and I'm like, it's art. People they'll ask, who's your favorite artist, and yes, I can name some artists, but art history is not something that actually particularly interests me. I
Right.
don't eat, sleep and drink art from that perspective. I eat, drink and sleep and whatever the phrase is, art from I'm more of a doer rather than a sort of an educator, if you like, or
Yeah.
the education on board. So, yes, I know who Van Gogh is, and yes, I know who all the other artists are to a point, but it's not something that I'm particularly well versed in.
Right.
And then, so I get the odd kind of sort of feeling of, well, maybe I'm not a real artist because I don't, I don't know all this stuff because all these other artists doing it. And then I go, no, actually, it just isn't, it's not.
Yeah, they don't. The other artists don't. They don't. That a lot of artists will pick up. They'll learn about one artist because they looked at their art, and then they make up this incredible story of like how Van Gogh totally inspired me. Like I could say that Jackson Pollock inspired me because I do drip in my paintings. And so I could be like, well, my art is a combination of inspiration from Picasso to Jackson Pollock. So what do I know about Jack? Well, so I do watch documentaries, not because of the art, but because I am fascinated by the story of the artist, right? Mm-hmm. So like, it's almost like you're watching this documentary and you're reading between the lines because whoever's putting the documentary together about Picasso, they're thinking one thing, right? But then they're describing his life and I'm like, oh man, he's an angry little man, and so like you start to see the frustration and what art meant to him and how back in this period art was a very macho. You had to be a very, very overly macho when you were an artist back then because they considered any male artist back in that era limp-wristed. And so like, and that was a bad thing. And so like, that's why you see these pictures of like Jackson Pollock or Picasso and they're all like, these like very, very manly men. That kind of stuff fascinates me. Gustav Klimt. Now, can I say that any of these people are my favorite artists? No, I don't. I like all the art that I look. I like a lot of pieces by Gustav. I like a lot of pieces by whatever. But
you're interested in people.
I'm interested in people.
When it comes to your art, I think most of us are like feeling our. And it comes to doing art, I don't know what I meant until after the fact.
Yeah.
In fact, even with songwriting, I might have a fuzzy idea of what I'm trying to say, but I often don't know what the message is until it's already out of me and on paper or in song format.
No one knows.
You find it after the fact. Not always. I guess sometimes I set out with an intention and I'm like, this is what I want to say with this, but it always evolves. Mm-hmm. So that whole, I went through that too of like, I don't talk the art talk real good at the art events. And such, and like, I don't know, like, do I have the mind to be like this crowd?
Why would you want to?
Right. So I came, that's a story we tell ourselves. I came around to like being comfortable with the idea of saying like, I don't get what that's about.
I mean, that was the reason we did the video with the random art critique generator so that you could like just put something in there and it'll be like
that was hilarious by the way. That was
because
there
because that's
in fact I'm going to leave a link to that in the description because that was just awesome.
Because that's essentially what you're dealing with when you go to, so the way that I see it, and I am fascinated by people. I am fascinated by motivations behind people, why they do the things. That is, I'm fascinated by why I do things when I'm, after the fact, and I'm like, why the hell did I, like, it's like, wow, what insecurities did I have that drove me to do this thing?
That's why I'm a nurse. That's why I got into mental health nursing, because I'm totally fascinated by people and how they develop as they're within their environment and all sorts of stuff. That's also, and it's probably why I'm a portrait artist as well, because people fascinate me.
Now, if you want to take a look at those documentaries, of other artists through that lens, and it'll change the experience, because I could not sit through an artist documentary to save my life. And it wasn't until I started to look at them as human beings who are the most insecure people in the world. Picasso, absolutely and completely insecure, completely trying to prove himself to the world his entire life. And like, you start to see these motivations behind it, Van Gogh's motivations. And that's what fascinates me about them, because they didn't fit into a certain standard, because they were artists. So that's where my fascination comes in, because, man, you go to these art events, and if you go to one of these art events and somebody is standing there looking at a painting and they're like, it reminds me of the blah, 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 blah. Basically what they are doing is quoting something that they thought of way earlier that they were going to say, to make themselves see, to show where it is that they fit in the hierarchy of that comfort. I'm somebody who's knowledgeable about art, and I'm like, I eat glue. Like, who cares? Like, which one? How are you going to be able to prove that that I'm way more that I'm not talented enough, or that I don't know enough about art? Like, and that's where it's so subjective.
We're good at telling ourselves all the stories, and Rafi and I have come around to calling it the stick man.
Yeah, the stick man in your head.
The little stick man that always has something to say about everything, and a lot of times it can be disempowering stories that we tell ourselves.
We call it the stick man so that we could disassociate from it. It's like, you know what, the stick man's telling me some crap today.
No, I mean, that's a good way of doing it, and I think that's one of the things that psychologists will do, is getting people to actually recognize that these thoughts are there, but and acknowledge them. Don't try and ignore them, but it doesn't mean to say that you'd have to pay attention to them. You can still acknowledge it.
They're not the voice of God coming into your head and being like, you're fat, old, fat, you're fat, you're fat. Yeah.
We all have that voice. If you, being able to say, like, the stick man needs a hug this morning because he's off on some tirade, but it's not outside. Like, there's nothing that I could do about it. Because for me, for a long time, I felt like a victim to my own mind. I just couldn't stop myself from thinking these things. And obviously that just perpetuates the problem.
Yeah.
So being able to find that neutral place and assign that silly character and understand that, like, I don't necessarily have to take those thoughts so seriously. Sometimes the stick man just needs a hug. I think
it's one of the reasons that I understand that there has to be labels, because in order to be able to treat somebody, you have to figure out what's going on with them. But I've known so many people that identify with that label and make it a part of their personality. So I've had people that will tell me, I suffer from chronic depression. And I'm like, I spent a huge portion of my life saying that. And that's what I identified with. And so no matter what I was doing, or no matter what I was trying to do in order to feel better, there was this constant truth that was just repeating in my head that, I suffer from chronic depression. And it wasn't until I realized, and I write about it in the book, I call it redefining your avatar, that image, the self-image that I had of myself was like this hurt little child that was sitting in the shadows, and that self-image, the way that I perceived myself, was not empowering, was not somebody that, and realizing that, I could redefine that self-image. I could create a new self-image and practice a different way of seeing myself. And so that's one of the reasons that for me, it always comes down to whether it's in my art career or in my life or just in the way that I'm looking at my thoughts. I'm either approaching something and feeling like a victim to it, or I am approaching something and feeling empowered. And I mean, that covers it all for me, because even if I am looking at the artist in town and I'm thinking like, well, they just blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm feeling like a victim. Whether I'm feeling like a victim to the town, to the circumstance, to whatever it is, or how do I look at this situation in a way where I can feel empowered, where I could stand in my footing and feel good, but not slap a happy face sticker on it. No. You know, not just like, oh, this is fine. Understand that, like, okay, I am looking at this in a way based on my insecurities that have to do with me. It doesn't have anything to do with them. It doesn't matter if they are looking at me in the face and saying, your art sucks. It still doesn't have anything to do with them. They're doing that for their own reasons, for their own insecurities, for whatever it is. The way that I take it, those are my buttons and my responsibility. And if I'm feeling like a victim to that, that's what I need to look at. And so it causes a lot of really interesting conversations here in the studio, because we each deal with our, you know, no matter how much time we've spent
every day
for the last
more than 10 years,
almost 11 years together. I could count on one hand how many days we've spent apart. We work together, we live together, we have spent all that time together. And I am still discovering her every single day. Every day, it's a new version. And I think that's a lot of people ask us, like, man, you guys really get along. It's because I don't know her. I know who she is, and I adore this person that is in front of me. But every day I get to meet an evolved version, a new version, somebody who's dealing with a new insecurity, opening a different facet of something. You know, it takes anything. One circumstance, one person says one thing, and all of a sudden it opens up this facet that you didn't even realize, this baggage that you didn't realize that you had. And then you're sitting there and you're like, well, I'm feeling it in my body, or like I had this thought today, or I'm wondering if you love me. You know, like all those silly thoughts that pop into your head, and the ability to sit there and look at those things and question their validity, and take a look at your feelings. If you are feeling broken, then that's not an empowering place. And using your emotions, you know how many times I've used my emotions to get myself out of a place of hopelessness, like anger. A lot of people are like, don't get angry because anger is bad. And I'm like, no. Anger is a fantastic place, because if you are feeling hopeless and you are feeling like a victim, right? Now, depending on where you're directing it, but so I will look at something that is making me feel like I'm not, like I just can't do it, like in a hopeless situation. And I will go as far as pounding my fist on a table and saying, I get to control how it is that I feel. I get to decide how I'm going to respond to this. I'm the one. My emotions are not going to be taken over by someone else's actions. I get to choose. I decide. And like that increase of that anger coming up, but not being direct. I'm not angry at myself. I'm not angry at this person. I am angry at the way that I'm choosing to respond, and understanding that I get to choose. That rush immediately pulls me out of hopelessness, because now my blood rate's up. I'm in fight or flight. I'm ready to go. And it leaves me with an everlasting impression of a sense of empowerment, which, you know, like in those studies where they realize that heightened emotion actually causes your neural pathways to form. So it's like using that as a way to get yourself to an empowered place instead of falling into that deep hopelessness. It's very easy. Like I said, I had, I used to tell people, like, I suffer from chronic depression. That's what would happen. I would downward spiral into hopelessness and would find no way of pulling myself out. And because I thought that it was bad to be angry.
Yeah, and it's interesting you should say that, because one of my favorite books is Destructive Emotions and How to Deal with Them, and it goes into that whole idea of it was basically like the Dalai Lama, psychologists, psychiatrists, lots of different people coming together. I can't remember the name of the group that they called it, but they had this discussion, and they had these presentations that they gave on what their idea of what destructive emotions were.
Wow.
What they the conclusion that they drew really was ultimately that there is no such thing as a destructive emotion per se. It was more to do with how a person chose to move forward from that emotion.
Exactly.
And anger can be quite motivating.
It could be, as long as you don't stay there, and as long as you're not simply directing it at someone and staying there. Because you could what I've noticed with anger is that you could easily use anger and think that you're being empowering, but you're honestly just being a victim, and you're solidifying that. Yeah. So if I'm angry at my mom because she did this thing to me, and I can't believe that my mom did it, and that's where I'm at, then I'm not getting any benefit, any empowerment from that. I'm just solidifying in my brain that I'm a victim to my mother. Yeah. And so it's that no matter where I'm at emotionally, that's where because I need to simplify things for myself, because, I'm a very simple human. It's, how do I feel right now? Do I feel like a victim in any way, shape, or form? Or do I feel empowered in this moment? And that at least allows me to look at the different facets of it and see how I can get to a place of empowerment whilst looking at this thing and making sure that this doesn't activate again, or at least that, because like the facets, I call it facets because it's almost like sometimes you're like, I'm good with this thing. And then there's a slight variation, and then all of a sudden you're not good, but it's not the same thing. You're never dealing with the same thing. You're just dealing with different levels of it, which is why I think people get discouraged when they're having breakthroughs with something that they're having difficulty with, because they don't understand that, like, it's not ever the same thing. It's just little breakthroughs in different facets. And sometimes it's going to feel like you're dealing with the same thing over and over and over, but it never is. It never is. It's always just these slightly different ways of looking at something that make it feel like that even years later, after, like, there have been things where I'm like, yeah, I'm good with that. And then 7 years later, like, it just hit me. It's like, yep, this way. And I'm like, whoa, holy crap. I'm feeling insecurity right now when it comes to this thing. And like, I thought I was over that, but apparently when it hits you from this angle, when this person says it. So like, these are all things that I wish people talked about more openly. Yeah. Talk about it in a more constructive way, in a more kind of interesting way, rather than moan about it. Because I think people talk about it, but they talk about it in such a destructive way, in that, they take ownership of it, my anxiety, my depression, my this, my that. Yeah. And I think it's, for me, it is about understanding our emotions a little bit better in order to be able to move forward, because the actual skills themselves of being whatever artist, whether it be a music artist or a visual artist, whatever it is, that's only a small part of being the best version of you, isn't it? And it's about being able to actually move forward with your emotions and not just the skills. So when you see classes who are just really about the skills, that's great for the skills perspective, but then what? Where do you learn? And that's one of the reasons I enjoy watching you guys, because that's the kind of things that you talk about on your channel. It's the reason I reached out to you and asked you if you would do this interview with me. Yeah. It's, again, a channel that I
watch
because
and like, oh yeah, I get that, and I understand that, because I feel those same things too, and these are things that I've had to find ways that I can deal with it, and how can we help other people to do that. So if I'm watching you guys to kind of get that sort of motivation and that kind of acknowledgement that I'm kind of not as mad as I think I am, what kind of channels do you watch? Do you watch other channels? Do you get that sort of same thing from other people?
You know what? I don't know that I watch other channels. A lot of times people that follow us, like I've watched some of your stuff. So like those, the people that reach out to us and stuff, those are the ones that I follow and listen to. Every once in a while I'll see something by Seth Godin, or I'll see something by somebody that maybe I read their book. We listen to a lot of audiobooks in the studio. A lot of what you're hearing from me though comes from an experience that I had before we met. And basically I had worked corporate, and I was living the exact perfect life that I should have been living, the life that, the white picket fence, the whole 9 yards. And I was miserable. And I had an experience where everything kind of fell apart. And at the end of it, I realized that my entire life up until that point had made sense, because it fit in perfectly with my belief system. I believed back then that women were this way, men are like this. There were all kinds of belief systems that I had based on what I realized were people that were not experts, like my parents. And, my dad is not an expert on what it means to be a man. My mom is not an expert on what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman. In fact, it's a moot point. We're just humans. And there were a lot of things that I bought into that just made me miserable. So I decided that I was going to start with a clean slate, that I was going to forget everything that I thought I knew. And basically the experience, the experience was brought on, and I'll share this here. I tried to commit suicide because I lost everything, my job, my family, everything. Even my 2 cars, both of them broke down same week. Like everything happened basically from one day to the next. And I, at that moment, didn't realize this, but at that moment, everything that I had basically done, all this miserable stuff to hold on to, like I'm going to work this job that I hate so much. And I'm going to do all these things that I feel are morally corrupt, just because I got to keep all these things that I have. And so because I had dealt with this kind of thing before, but I decided that I was going to expire by just not getting up out of bed. I was just going to lay in bed, and I was completely in a downward spiral, if you want to call it that. And on the 7th day of just laying there, like not getting up, not using the bathroom, not anything, just not good. The 7th day, you know how when people talk about like your life flashes before your eyes, right? So like my life flashed before my eyes, but it wasn't like it was all simultaneous. Like it wasn't like from point A to point B, like when I was a kid or whatever. And what I saw were these images, of me as a small kid, and my mother standing over me and saying, "You're not my son and I hate you," and blah, blah. But instead of hearing her saying those things and feeling the emotions that I was feeling, I could hear her thoughts, and her thoughts were that she was in pain and she hated herself and that she's frustrated with her life. And she hates herself even more right now. Why do you make me do this? Why do you make me behave this way? You know, all that frustration that I thought was directed at me as a kid, realizing that it had nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was miserable. My dad was miserable. And so like all of a sudden the entire structure of this world that I thought I knew, you know, like what it meant to be a man. I use that as an example. So like there I am as a kid. This is one of the images. As a kid, I'm 6 years old, eating a piece of Kraft cheese, sitting on a chair, watching James T. Kirk from the Starship Enterprise say, "Bones, this is what it means to be a man." And then fast forward to I'm 14 years old, and there's my dad and my uncle drinking bourbon, and they're like, "A man, the real man is this and this and this." And then, you know, going back in time, and my mom is like, you know, you're just like your father. Men are all the same, blah, 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 blah. And like all of that had built my perspective of what a man was.
Mm-hmm.
And it was completely contradictory and nonsensical. And yet that's what I based my entire life on. So like, that's one example, but it just, I sound really airy-fairy whenever I talk about this experience because I cannot quantify it. I just know that it happened, whether it was a dream or not. This is how it happened. And all I know is that that moment changed something very, very deep inside of what was going on in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that moment I decided I was going to redefine what it meant to be me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's where that came from. And of course, after that happened and I was redefining me, everybody was like, he's lost his mind. Something's wrong with him. He's got a God complex. Somebody was telling, I was like, what are you talking about? Like they were telling me all kinds of things about myself because I was like, no, I get to decide who I am.
It's very common. It's very, very, very common. Even when, you know, I'm in my role as a nurse, I have met people who have been working hard to be a better version of themselves and not be this label anymore. And it's their husbands or their wives or their family members who have so much, investment in them being this particular label that they sabotage it. I mean, they don't. I don't for a second believe that they get up and think, well, I'm going to sabotage it. But there is that subconscious stuff going on. And it's usually family and friends that are doing the sabotaging, and they probably don't even realize they're doing it.
Well, they tried to get everything to go back to the status quo because that's what they were comfortable with.
Right, because they want to protect you, because they don't want to lose you, because they're not comfortable with change for any number of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And they think it's love-based a lot of times.
Of course.
Yeah.
But
then I came on the scene. Yeah,
and so like by the time Klee came on the scene, my family were like, well, this is what we get now. It's this weird, happy, he's so happy. Why is he so happy? Because I was like, wait a second, I get to define. So like at that point, I was using my imagination. I like to refer to this as using your imagination for good, right? Because we have these powerful, intricate imaginations that are virtual reality machines where you could think about a piece of lime and you could feel the tanginess in your mouth, or you could almost smell it, or you could hear the drum beat of something. It's like this amazing virtual reality machine that for the most part we use to worry about bills or stupid things like that. Like that's, you're like, oh, am I gonna totally mess up when we go to the art show? We have this powerful engine, and automatically we're like, using it for fight or flight. And which, by the way, when you go into fight or flight, you get dumb. Your brain gets dumb. You just get dumb, and you don't use those faculties that make us so powerful. So like, I was waking up in the morning and realizing what can I do to really emphasize my day, to really brighten my day, because I've spent a lot of days of my life practicing how to be miserable, because I got really good at that. I was amazing at that. I should get an award for how awesome I was at being miserable. And so I was like, okay, well, let me use my imagination. So I decided that when I'd walk out of the house, there were all these stones in the walkway, that I was going to imagine that every stone was just really happy to see me and had these cute little faces. It was like, good morning, Rafi. And they sang this beautiful song. And they sang this beautiful song to me and told me how amazing it was. And one of the things that people were like, well, now he's got a God complex, was because I was standing in the yard and a bunch of butterflies came in. I was like, oh, look at that. These butterflies are here for me. This is awesome. This is my experience. They're like, oh, so you caused the butterflies? I'm like, no, that's not, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, But it was like using my imagination to feel happy. And I think it just went through, I had to go through these different steps of like really taking a look at different things. And I gave myself the opportunity to do that, with facing things with my mom and with my dad and with different people. And then finally it was like facing my insecurity of being an artist. When I left high school, I was like, I'm going to be an artist, Dad. I don't care what you say. And I didn't do it because I was too scared. But that's the model of my life. That's what made sense back then. And I like to tell people that I lost my mind. I have no problem with saying that, because essentially the mind that I had, I lost it. I got rid of it. All the insecurities and all not all the insecurities. That's a little pretentious. Obviously, I still have a lot of my old insecurities and things like that,
and new ones too.
But the way that I is different. I don't give in to my insecurities. I'm not a victim to my own mind. Yeah. It's my mind. I get to decide. So I don't relate to calling myself a chronic depressive, but I also understand that it is an old habit, that it is easy for me to downward spiral into that. So don't take moments that are making me not feel good for granted, and just allow myself to just go down there, investigate it, and take a look and see how it is that next time I could approach this differently.
Yeah. It's about not getting complacent, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Not getting comfortable.
Definitely.
We don't get comfortable. Like a lot of people are like, well, I'm really comfortable with my mate.
or my current level of art production, or my regimen that I follow every day. I have to watch myself. I do not thrive in sameness, but I am a creature of habits sometimes. If I don't check in with myself. I think probably that's not very uncommon either. I think people can fall into ruts very easily, but I don't think we thrive there. I don't think we really want that sameness, stagnation.
No, I mean, listen, life, being on this planet is a blink of an eye, and going through sameness every day, just doing the same thing that you're comfortable with, and with no challenges, no growth, if you're just doing the same thing, then what's the point?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it has to be this like grand gesture or grand thing of like, I am going to develop a different way of creating art. It doesn't have to be that. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be like, I'm going to trash all my insecurities in one day. Like, that's not it. It's today, I'm going to smile really big today. I'm going to have a good time today. And I'm going to do at least one small thing that maybe I'm a little scared to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know for me, that's where being eclectic comes in, because I haven't done any painting for probably a good few weeks now. But that's because I've been kind of going more head into my photography stuff. So I've been doing a lot of composite work with my photographs, and, just I've actually got some jewellery stuff that I bought ages ago that I was thinking the other day, I really fancy trying that jewellery, and then realised I didn't know where I put it. That old chestnut. I know it's around here somewhere. But,
Yep.
I find that when I dive, I kind of go off and do something, I'll go on a tangent and do something else. Then when I come back to my painting, for example, I suddenly find that I've moved on in my painting, that I'm no longer stuck, or
Yep.
do you know what I mean? It just seems to help me to kind of keep moving forward rather than staying stagnant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Recently, so I do a lot of jewelry work, and I've been doing some over the last 2 months, but I've also been needle felting, which was a new skill I picked up. And I actually found that, like, during this time, needle felting has kind of been my happy place. And so I've been kind of focusing on that, and a little bit of music too,
Yep.
which is something that can really fall by the wayside if I let it.
And that's where the goggles. So she's done.
Oh yeah, so I've been making these
furry
little-
goggles.
So adorable.
And if you remember the story of the pebbles saying good morning,
It's kind
it's
of
like
the
everything in my life inspires
Yeah.
something.
Mm-hmm.
but I am in full agreement with that, of like, how are you inspired to greet the day? It doesn't have to be what you think you should do that day. Like, I should be working on jewelry all the time because I am a jewelry artist. That is my profession.
People use that against themselves all the time. It's one of the reasons that the whole idea of, where people talk about having a positive mindset, and then it gets twisted around because people take it the wrong way. They think that it means that you're just supposed to be smiling all the time and only focused on positive things and don't allow yourself to get mad or sad. And it's like, that's not the point.
No.
If you're doing that, all you're doing is slapping on a happy face sticker. And meanwhile, things are boiling underneath, and eventually they're going to rise. And that's why a lot of people with the positive mindset movement, that are out there preaching the wrong thing to people, that eventually get discouraged by it and think that, it's because I was thinking positive and then this bad thing happened. It's like, no, you're staying away from something that may benefit you because you had a bad experience, because you were using it in a dumb way, like not in a way that is productive to who you are. So like, I think, I don't know, with our channel, the one thing, even though we talk about art and artists and stuff like that, but even like with my book, I barely talk about the art world. I mostly talk about the emotional state, because the most important thing, the biggest roadblock that I had was not mastery of the art.
No.
That's not it. That's regardless. So the way I like to describe it is this. You can go out and paint a black circle on a piece of canvas every day. And every day you get a little bit better at making it more round, a little bit better at making it more round, and a little bit better at making it more round, right? So every day you work on this, and by the end of like 5 years, you have a collection of 100 circles or 1,000 circles, right? These beautiful, perfectly round circles. But if you didn't put yourself out there, and you didn't face your insecurities, they're meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything about our insecurities is something that you faced when you actually put yourself out there and you share the stuff, all of those things. And so at that point, you get to question, are my circles good enough? Are they this? They're just circles. Who cares?
Mm-hmm.
Who cares how masterful you are at creating a circle? Because your circle is going to be different than Joe Schmo's circle over there. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who has more mastery at this skill or at that skill. What matters, what makes you an artist, is not just the fact that you create art or that you're creative. what makes you an artist is that you're willing to communicate with people in that way, whatever way it is that you decide to do it, whether it's music, art, needle felting, jewelry, videos on YouTube, whatever it is. It's all just creative communication.
We've said a lot that kids have it right in so many ways. They wear their emotions on their sleeves. They do whatever they're inspired to do in the moment, usually for the fun of it. They're not afraid to show what they've created to other people. They don't hold a grudge. Yeah. And for the most part, they haven't learned to judge themselves yet. Kids have it right in a lot of ways. And sometimes it's a matter of us asking, like, well, what would a kid do in this situation? Maybe do that.
Yeah. And I mean, kids, before they get indoctrinated into adulthood, before they become little adults. I mean, I think about that because, like, when you look at a kid and you're like, oh, look, they're playing house, and it was, I'm going to work today, and then they make the face, and they're all serious. Yeah, like the adult face. I'm like, man, that's what we look like? Like, I don't want to look like that.
Like a bunch of giants.
My daughter did that to me when she was little. I was watching her out of the kitchen, and she was doing this whole kind of, she was pretending she was eating, and she did this whole, and she was doing this, and then she grabbed the plate, and she put the plate down, and she stormed off, and she went like this. And I realised that she was actually mimicking me, so I must have done that at some point. You know, and I was like horrified. I was thinking, oh my goodness, I've obviously done this at some point.
Kids are awesome for being I don't even know what I'm trying to say. They're just awesome for showing us.
They're a good things model. Like that. I mean, you think about it, like two kids in a playground, they have a disagreement over something, and 10 minutes later you look and they're playing with one another. They don't sit there and hold a grudge. If anything, the parents then off on the side are like, well, you're not talking to him anymore. You know, like, and I'm like, it is a great model. Luckily for me, after my experience, it was my 5-year-old son that I got to watch and realized how he eats when he's hungry. You know, when he's hungry, he says, Dad, I'm hungry. There isn't, like, you got to eat lunch at a certain time. You got to eat dinner at a certain, you got to do this. There were all these structures that I was like, man, this makes stuff so difficult when life is really much more simple than that.
Yeah.
And then watching different interactions and watching him say, like, I'm not hungry, and my mother getting mad at him because he wasn't eating his dinner. And me finally because that was one of my insecurities, was standing up and saying, Mom, nobody's going to starve in this house. Like, I don't understand why this is, you could save it for later. He'll eat it later when he's hungry. But it was in watching that and realizing, like, there are so many things that I grew up with that were like, this is what you're supposed to do. You do this, even as simple as this is the time that you should wake up. This is the time that you should go to bed. This is the time that you should have breakfast, lunch, dinner, and like all these things. And I'm like, where did these constructs come from? That
such as naps are for the weak.
Yeah. Like I'm like
I like naps quite a bit.
Yeah. Like, I'm hungry and it's 3:00. It's not dinner time yet. Well, maybe I could have a dinner. We could have snacks though. Well, what kind? Well, you can't eat an entire meal. It has to be like a little tiny, like, it just, I'm like, there are so many things that are just the way that things are.
And we don't know why.
It'd be amazing. It's amazing when you sit there, you question it. You're like, what?
Yeah.
I love watching people's reactions to us too, when we're like, yeah, we're going to go, whatever. And they're like, you're going to have, of course it became fashionable where people were like, we're going to have breakfast for dinner. Like, what do you want for dinner? What do you want for dinner? There's no way, like, waffles and stuff like you can't have that for dinner. That's not a dinner food item. And I remember my mom was like that. Like, I was like, I want eggs and whatever. And my mom would be like, that is not dinner food. You need to eat dinner food. I'm like, why do I need to eat dinner food? After I got older, I was like, you're nuts.
It was always dinner
It's
food for
food.
me because I only had like 4 things that I knew how to cook. So, so eggs were an option for all meals of the day.
Right.
But I understand what you're saying there with the eggs for the dinner.
I mean, you eat. It's just, I think when it comes to anything that causes you to put a pause on what you want out of life, it's something that you could question. Obviously, there are some things that you might be like, I want that person's car. Well, you can't have it because it doesn't belong to you. You know, so like there are things that you might have to question and say like, no, that's not something that I'm willing to do. I wouldn't feel right doing it. But when it comes to anything, like I want to have, well, you can't do that. Like you question it. You question your own mind telling you what you can and cannot do because you can do whatever you want.
Even to say like, I just want to stare out the window all day at the trees. And your mind says that is completely irresponsible.
Yeah, you are not being productive.
You are not being a productive member of society if you are staring at the trees all day. But it's what I want. I'm not hurting anyone. Like, it's what I want to do.
Not only that, but think of the answer where somebody comes up to you and they're like, what are you doing? You're like, today's my staring at the trees day. And then they're like, really? That's all you're doing today? Like, yep, it's a pretty amazing day. Today I get to just sit here and stare at the trees. And what would happen is that person would be, first of all, what they would say is like, well, that's a waste of time. But secretly on the inside, they'd be like, I wish I could just sit there and stare at the trees. You know, like that's what's actually happening because we're all walking around telling ourselves that we have to be productive and that we have to do this. And, you know, oh, the quarantine is happening. So why are we not doing things?
Oh, yeah. My house should be immaculate. My closet should be purged of all the clothes I don't need. Everything, all my orders should be completed, every commission. Like, why don't I have these things done? Self-judgment of like, well, this person said that they did all these things and planted a garden during the lockdown. Like, am I being as efficient a human as I should be during lockdown? I don't know. Some days I spend the whole day thinking about my feelings.
Because that's what life is all about, just being an efficient human.
Yeah, I'm going to be really glad when I get to the end of it all and I've been as efficient as possible.
Yeah, and if you're anything like me, you'll be like, I really want to do something productive today, and I can do X, Y, Z, or maybe A, B, C, or I can do, or maybe, and then by the time you actually decide what you're going to do, the day's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, well, I'll make the most of this evening. I'll have a nightcap with Rafi and we'll talk about whatever we talk about and it'll be awesome.
I mean, guys, the amount of time that we've been chatting, it's been absolutely awesome. It doesn't feel like we've been chatting for as long as we have. I think we've had I hope that we've had a really interesting conversation, and I hope that lots of people have kind of gleaned some stuff that they can relate to and stuff that will actually help them. So I think it's probably about time that we kind of decide to sort of wind this down. So what's next for Rafi and Klee then? Is there anything in particular? What are you hoping
We don't know.
We have no idea.
We don't know.
We're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants.
Yeah, we've tried to like plan for the future of our art careers, but
the way you said that.
That's how you say that. We have tried. And of course we think about and talk about things that we might find exciting. But all the best things that have happened were because like we were just pursuing some harebrained idea at the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we really have no idea. We're really enjoying what we're doing online right now, all the different ways we're connecting. So I think we'll continue to do that.
Yep.
There have been talks about a mobile Rafi and Klee studio that might travel around, like traveling version 2.0. But we will continue to be huge nerds that love each other a lot.
Yeah. And just create stuff.
Yeah.
And have fun doing it. And, anytime that we set out on an endeavor and we realize while we're doing it that it's not fun, then we just change direction.
Yeah.
I think life is way too short to not enjoy the moments. Mm-hmm. And by moments, it means every day. If you realize how precious every single day is,
yeah,
you would take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't take it for granted, and you wouldn't just do the same thing. So
yeah.
I don't know where we're heading, what we're doing. All I know is that we'll have a lot of fun getting there.
Absolutely. And I can be sure that Rafi will do things that initially make me uncomfortable, like start live streaming with no warning. and I will jump on board, and I will be more and more comfortable with trying new things and pushing myself always.
Yep.
Too. That's what we're doing.
For those viewers who have come along and are watching this and they don't necessarily particularly know you, where's the best place to find you then?
Our website, rafiandklee.com, is the hub. Every single thing we're doing is on that website. It's a mammoth website.
A lot of people ask us, like, how do you do an art website? I'm like, listen, I'm the wrong person to ask because I threw the kitchen sink and everything else into our website. Mm-hmm. So we have a podcast. We have the YouTube videos.
We have Patreon. We have a store and
a blog and like all the fun stuff. There's just, it's fun. For anybody that's looking for us, that basically connects to everything else. So
yeah, rafiandklee.com.
Yeah.
I shall pop that in the description then for anybody who wants to be lazy and click on it.
Well, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I did not realize the time had gone by either.
I didn't realize the time had gone by either. I got to drive out and go pick up a print.
Oh, yeah, I'll go with you. You're very easy to talk to and wonderful, and I enjoyed the questions you had for us and the directions that we went. So thank you.
Yeah, it was. I had a very good time. Did not even realize how much time has gone by. So thank you for this. This was fun.
Well, I hope everybody else has kind of not realized how much time has gone by either. And I just wanted to explain that one of the reasons why I'm not looking at the camera is because I'm actually the way I've got my camera set up. I'm actually looking at my Wacom rather than my screen, because my computer screen is actually here. And I'm looking at my Wacom. I'm actually looking down. So forgive me if I've appeared rude. That's not what I've intended to do.
we totally get it.
Yeah.
We totally get it. Yeah. And there's all those weird nuances with, like, sometimes it looks like I'm weirdly looking to the left when I'm like looking at certain parts of our screen.
She's just weirdly looking.
Sometimes I'm weirdly looking to the left. For no reason.
Thank you so very much for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. Take care, everybody. Don't forget, look after your mental well-being, because nobody else can, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Goodbye.